This podcast is brought to you by Penji. Penji is a creative subscription service that gives you access to pre-vetted, agency-trained creatives from all over the world. From graphic design to illustrations to social media management and web development, it's all included for one monthly price. It's time to say goodbye to the hassle of searching for top-notch creative talent. With Penji, you get quality and consistency delivered right to your inbox every day. Carefully crafted for you by humans, so meet your new creative team today. Head over to penji.co for more and enter the coupon code located within the podcast show notes.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Fully Managed Podcast. This is the podcast where we discuss marketing and business tips to help assist you guys in your business journeys. I'm your host, Daniela, and I'm Penji's partnership coordinator. I'm joined here today with a very special guest, Lorenz Esposito from SearchX Pro. Hi, Lorenz. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to have you today on the podcast. So before we start, or I guess to start is maybe the better way to phrase it, to break the ice a little bit, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, SearchX Pro, everything that we need to know about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think where to begin would be who I am. So I actually am a former semi-professional soccer player. I played in Sweden for 2018 to around 2022, took a year off, popped back over there again in 2024. And it wasn't until I actually moved over there in 2018 that I fell in love with digital marketing. And it was from there that I realized that, I didn't want to become a jack of all trades, but I wanted to be very hyper-focused in one area of digital marketing. So for me, I was very drawn towards the SEO side of things. You could kind of get an idea of how important that is for businesses. But that's kind of where SearchX also started to get its roots, into the coming years from where I was then. But yeah, I've been in the digital marketing world for about 5-6 years now. And it wasn't until a year ago that I founded SearchX. And one of the big things behind it was I was looking at kind of the opportunities within the space where I felt there was a lack of attention, and there's kind of an opportunity for these, another agency to come in. And for me, that was coming from some of the bigger agencies, in the US. It felt like there's almost like a lack of attention and care for, not just small businesses, medium-sized businesses, but just the overall landscape of how people interact and communicate with clients. And so, yeah, I'm not sure if that was maybe a little bit too much, but that's kind of how SearchX came to be. That's, a little bit about who I am. Former soccer player turned SEO guru, maybe expert, however you want to say it. But yeah, this is where I am now.
So why'd you, this is probably a little bit of a tangent, but I'm just so curious. I swear to God, we'll get to the marketing questions, guys, but why did you stop soccer and move over to SEO? Like, what made you do that career shift? I know soccer is a pretty short-lived career because you age out of it pretty quick, but I mean, you could have still stayed in the business with like coaching.
Yeah. So the interesting side of it was, maybe I'll take a step back. I actually was always working. So even when I worked at a full-time agency before SearchX, I was still over there. So I was balancing both at the same time. My employer at the time was very okay with it. They realized, look, if work is getting done, clients aren't really noticing in quotes, right? Most of them knew I still played, but as long as it wasn't affecting, the progression of the client's, health, they were moving in the right direction. It wasn't looked at as a distraction. So that was the big part for me, was positioning as it wasn't a distraction for me, but actually made me work better, right? Because we always look at having side hustles, passion projects, stuff of that nature. And luckily, while I was over in Sweden, when I was training and playing, that was when everyone was still sleeping, right? So by the time 2 p.m. came around in Sweden, it was just becoming 8 a.m. in the US. So I was able to kind of get certain things done, project manage my own time, and then have enough time for them to also, not notice a work difference. But I would say that, the big thing for me was to why I kind of have put it on the back burner / stopped. It was just it's grown tremendously over the past year. And while I love playing, I love, making a little bit of side money, it wasn't bad. I realized that I also had to put more attention into being a CEO and growing this company to kind of its full extent. Now, I don't know many people who would want to hire a company where their CEO is also playing full time in another country. But it's a cool conversation starter. But I think most people also want to know that I'm fully focused on the clients, the growth of the company, the quality of work. So that's kind of where that side came into play too.
Yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense. You kind of have to put all of your eggs in one basket at one point. I feel like not always, but there's a point where you have to sort of be focused on one thing. It's hard to juggle all of it, especially with like a sport, I think, because that requires so much just training.
Yeah. I mean, to that point too, I think, with the juggling side, I think it was a benefit and it was good because it wasn't really I'm trying to build another company up, right? And putting my attention towards another company that I was building. This was like a pure passion project, something I've done my whole life, right? And people aren't going to say, "Oh, you can't play soccer and also build your business." But if you're trying to build two different businesses, that's a little bit, entering into a world of, okay, is his focus really on the clients there, right? It's almost like someone who goes to the gym, right, for 2 hours a day, right? Are you going to argue that they shouldn't go to the gym because they're trying to build a business? No. But that's kind of how I've always looked at it too.
That's so cool. I think very interesting life story, and it definitely makes for like a topic of conversation.
Absolutely.
But moving on to the marketing topics, which is what the podcast is meant to be about.
Yeah.
um, you mentioned that you felt like in the industry, in the business, there was a lack of care for customers, right? And
Mhm.
that kind of like inspired you to sort of start putting more effort into SearchX Pro. Can you elaborate a little bit on what your impression was on that lack of connection between an agency and a client? That is, I'm assuming it still exists in like the agency space.
Yeah, and I'll probably preface this with, I would say that my former agencies aren't, I wouldn't say this applies to them fully. And I'd also say that being an agency owner now, I've come across way worse agencies that are doing this. So my former companies were very, they're pretty good at, maintaining that level of attention, but I could feel certain things coming to light with the way maybe teams were built. And so for myself, and there's maybe no right or wrong way to it. It's just a preference of the client and the company or the agency. But I realized, I wasn't a big fan of there always being account managers, right? So when you look at a team that's being built and assigned towards, a client, traditionally there's been account managers, then maybe the specialists in each field, an SEO expert, a content writer, a paid ad specialist, it could be a website developer, right? So your team can kind of be built out and broken down to 4 to 6 different people. One of the ways that I've tried to build SearchX was, let's remove the middleman of the account manager who then transfers, information and, delegates tasks out. We wanted to make that become the person actually doing the work too. Now, what that does is it means that the SEO manager now has to take more attention into what's actually going on, but it's a direct line of communication. So there is nothing that gets confusing. Now, on top of that, it also means we can't have one SEO manager working 10 to 15 to 20 other accounts. That's what account managers do. They just delegate tasks from the client to the agency team. And it can get a little, confusing, and you don't feel that attention, right? If I know, Daniela, that you're working on 20 other accounts, how much attention are you really giving me right now? So that's one of the things we've tried to really put a focus on is we don't want anyone to be burnt out. We don't want any one of our SEO managers working more than 5 to 7 accounts in any given time frame. Now, obviously, it can go up or down. It fluctuates, but that's kind of the gist, and that's kind of the North Star that we've kept here at SearchX. And when you have that, disconnect, I would say, with an account manager to an SEO content manager, it's just one more line of communication, one extra step to get your point across where we can skip all that. The way I look at it is like, if we don't need to have a 15 or 30-minute meeting, it could just be a Slack message. Cool. Let's do that instead. It's more efficient in my eyes.
No, I totally agree. I think so. I have a co-host. Her name is Shannon. We both host a podcast, and we had a conversation about that recently, where we were just talking about how when we started doing this, it was really difficult because we were taking on way too much. We were just basically juggling way too many episodes, too many people in a
Mm-hmm.
day, emailing just way too many people. Just in general, it was too much. And what you spoke about your account managers, it's so true, because I feel like we could not. It was a very short-lived experience because we learned from it really quickly that we were like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we can't do this because it really affects everything. It affected our mood. It affected the way that we conducted the podcast. And like it also just affected the quality of the work that we were putting out. Like I caught
Mm-hmm.
myself emailing people and calling them wrong names because I just had so many people that I couldn't, like, my brain was at max capacity, and I was like, no, this is
Yeah.
not Jennifer, her name is Sarah, and like what business is this woman, like, and then like you said, like the person that you're working with starts to question how important they actually are to
Mm-hmm.
you. And it's not that
Yep.
they're not important, it's just that you're so overloaded that the
Yeah.
quality is not there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, for me, it also, it was a good proof of, concept that it was the right choice for how I wanted to build SearchX out with our teams. Was 3 or 4 of our last clients we signed always ask, how big is your team? How many clients do you have? Right. I don't know if they're fully privy to all that information, but they're asking for a reason, right? They want to know that we are not just an extension of their team, but we are their team. Um, because when you hire an agency, I mean, I did a LinkedIn post about this not a couple of weeks ago, but they're hiring us to kind of fill that void of having to, we are usually a fraction of the cost of just one hire. 3 to 5K towards an agency is the equivalent, and you get a team of 5 for us. That's the equivalent of one hire at any normal company. So when you look at it from that standpoint, yeah, they're hiring to get your full attention. You are filling the void of someone who would give 100% attention towards the company, but you're breaking it down into 5 people now. So just making sure that that's always the reason why, and how we build these teams up. That's kind of the reason why I chose to do this for SearchX too.
That's so interesting. And I think you definitely see a change in when you were able
Hmm.
to do a structure like that. Because I think we felt it. We sort of capped what we did with the podcast is that we kind of capped out the number of episodes that we were filming a day and the number of people that we were talking to on the regular to get on the show to sort
Hmm.
of, keep the flow sustainable for us.
Yeah.
And I felt like there was a complete change in quality and just in my mood in general. I wasn't as suffocated every day, just trying to run from one place to another.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I know that like you spoke about how SEO was the biggest thing that, you sort of always were fluctuating towards.
Hmm.
Um, and I think SEO in marketing is probably one of the the biggest terms or the biggest things that are always brought up in campaigns. I talk to a lot of business owners who are really either very intimidated by SEO or very like into SEO. Like I feel like there's always no in between. They either love SEO or they're terrified by it. Especially with like small business owners, I think a lot of small business owners tend to be a little bit more scared of it because they're very new to marketing in general. But I'm wondering, why did you sort of decide to join specifically SEO and kind of like give a focus on that?
Yeah, so one of the things that, I would say the main reason that I was drawn towards it was one, even in 2020, 21, AI started to become a little bit more of a thing, right? And, search SEO, search engine optimization, right, is optimizing the search engines for search, for how are you being found by your audience, your customers. And ultimately, one of the big things that I really enjoyed about it was seeing how there's so many different, manipulations of the search engines to get the results that you're looking for. Why is it when someone publishes 5 blogs a month and someone publishes one, they rank higher, right? It's a very big game of kind of, how do you build up your resume as a website? How do you build up kind of like your history as to who you are, build up, it's almost like a digital library of what you're doing. And it's showcasing the authority from that regard. And when you look at small businesses, the typical price of an agency a good one, I would say, is always going to be roughly around 3 to 5K a month. Now, there's a reason for that. It's because the quality content that comes into play, the quality of the expertise of the team that's being assigned to you, right? The 5K that goes into that brings 5 more people towards your team, right? We are that extension of there. But it's interesting because it's always changing. You've seen ChatGPT, you've seen all the AI search engines that are out there, Google, Bing, traditional search engines as well. There's always fluctuations in the top 10 results. And at the end of the day, it's going to come down to different factors, different SEO items that we're doing that are going to help, change those positions for each company. Now, the fun part about it is that we know there's no rhyme or reason to why something may happen, but we do have a good North Star that we can listen to and apply towards daily businesses to help them rank better at the end of the day. And the reason I also was gravitated towards SEO is the smaller businesses. Sometimes that 3 to 5K range is difficult for them, depending on what they do, and that's where I kind of felt, coming from bigger agencies, I could apply that kind of mindset and results, the big agency results, towards smaller businesses. I've seen clients pay 20, 30K a month for SEO, and I've worked those accounts, and I've said, whoa, I'm doing all this work, but my salary is 70K right now. How do I get maybe just 5K of that or 10K towards my company, myself included, and also perform the same exact work, right? So that's where, I would say we're not fully niched down to smaller, medium-sized businesses. We do have a few enterprise clients, but we found that our sweet spot is the smaller clients. And it's more impactful too, right? When you meet these small business owners, I'm in Charleston, South Carolina right now. When I meet these business owners in person and they tell me how much their business means to them, I'm more bought in now as a CEO, right? I'm not working accounts like I used to anymore at SearchX, but I'm more bought into your success. I hold my team to a higher standard, even if it's a smaller account, no matter who pays. It doesn't matter what their monthly payments are, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. Everyone gets treated the same here from a care and attention perspective, because I've been on the other side of it. And I know that that's going to be what keeps people longer. And it keeps people, they don't want to leave when they feel you're actually their team. And they don't notice that difference. So that's kind of where we try to, make that mark there.
That's so interesting. No, I totally agree. I think like that connection is always going to make a person, especially a business owner, feel a lot more inclined to continue to work with you than if they just feel like they're a number on your sheet of people that they're giving stuff to. I want to ask you about this because I feel like when you work with small business owners, there is a gap that, like, I guess, or a bridge. I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like there is a sort of space that divides the expert that is helping, that agency owner opposed to the business owner that's trying to grow, because business owners tend to get lost once their business starts to take off. I've spoken to a lot of small business owners who always talk about how they realized they had to wear many hats, like overwhelmed by the fact that they were good at their product, they were good at whatever it is that they were trying to sell or the service that they were trying to provide. But then as soon as the business gets kickstarted, they realize, oh yeah, but I also have to do the bookkeeping. I have to be, a part of the marketing, the sales, like all of these different things. And they were overwhelmed and terrified by it. I've also spoken to a lot, like I'm thinking of this one business owner who said, like, I had a great service, but I was terrible at marketing. And like, he had to sort of outsource that to someone who knew about marketing so that they could actually help him with implementation, because he had no clue what he was doing. And it was really just affecting his business because he was not getting any sales or leads from anything that he was trying to do. Right. With that in mind, my question, I feel like this is a very long-winded question, but how do you communicate stuff like this with small business owners who are probably very new and don't understand a lot of this? I think a lot of people sort of know what SEO is on technical term. You might understand it, but then actually seeing it implemented, seeing results from it, understanding how this is helping can be difficult.
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest things I've noticed with small business owners and look, it's very common, right? And it also depends how you kind of start your business, right? Are you coming from, and maybe this is the wrong word, but not, someone with experience, right? When you start a business with experience, you need an accountant, you need someone to help set up the marketing, someone to set up your website, set up different areas. Now, a good business owner knows when to surround themselves with people who are better than them. Um, Now, the one side that I'll always say is, we have a lot of HVAC landscapers, a lot of service-based industries that we do work in. Those guys are so good at what they do when it comes to the execution of their craft, right? Whether it's an electrician or a plumber or an HVAC guy, those guys know exactly what they're doing. Like I wouldn't even dabble in that field, right? I would use them if I need help with my house, but that's about it. Now, when it comes to these owners, they get very lost and they always struggle with managing to kind of translate how good they are at what they do, and also finding new users, or not new users, but new customers to find them, right? Every customer they come across, it's usually going to be a 5-star review. But how do you get 50 to 100 more 5-star reviews? It's tough unless you start to add in different elements of marketing, SEO, Google Ads, social media, whatever it could be. So when you come across those different, those business owners wanting to do everything, it usually only gets them so far in the first year, right? Where they have their own sort of referral market. And I love small businesses that have that strong referral market, right? They say, well, we've grown to 1 million a year just by word of mouth. That is amazing. And I love that because it tells me you are so good at what you do that if I can just bring in 10 more, 20 more leads a month to you, you're going to execute and you're going to promise the work that I've promised these people by ranking you on Google. So when you kind of look at it from that standpoint, that that lens, these business owners, the quicker they can kind of identify their need to kind of hire and outsource. It's also at the end of the day, it's how do you grow your business? How do you go from 1 million to 5 million? How do you go from 5 million to 10 million? Right? You can't do that on your own if you're trying to do 6 different things. Right? There comes a point when you do need to hire out. So kind of identifying with that in the service-based industries that we predominantly do work within, those are kind of the people I love to communicate with, and try to sign as clients because they are so good at what they do. If we can just throw a little bit of magic into the marketing and see the results come in, their businesses typically, from what we started to see in our first year, they start to 2 or 3x within the next the first 6 to 8 months, in whatever form that is. So yeah, that's what I would say.
That's so cool. But also, what do you, I mean, I don't know if this happens to you, but if it does, what happens or how do you manage it when you have a client whose expectations don't align with realistic results? I don't know if
Yeah,
that has ever happened.
no, absolutely. I mean, I think, that's one of the big questions around SEO, right? I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but, it's typically seen as a long-term play, right? And so it just depends, and, it's always up to the agency. How do you kind of communicate this towards a client, right? The way I look at it with most clients, it depends on who you are, where you are in your journey as a business. Have you been around for 6 months? Have you been around for 10 years? How competitive is your market, right? A lot of these areas, what kind of keywords do you want to target, right? A lot of these areas are going to play a factor into how quickly do results come in. Now, with every client that we do manage, we're always looking at setting expectations in the first 1 to 3 months, then the next 3 to 6 months. So, depending on where they are in their journey, we'll say, hey, you don't rank for any keywords right now. The first 1 to 3 months is about keyword acquisition. How do we get you ranking for plumbers in Charleston, South Carolina, in plumbers near me, plumber Charleston plumber, right? A specific keyword. When we can identify what they're okay with as a KPI, then that's where we can start to really set the foundation and the expectations for them. There are clients who will come to me and say, "Hey, we want to rank number 1 on Google, in 3 months, in 6 months." Say, look, we're not saying we can't do it, but it would be wrong of me to say we can, we will promise that. Promising is something we typically always try to avoid. But one of the analogies I always like to use is it's like going to the gym, right? You can set a goal to, bench press, squat 250 pounds, but can someone really promise you that you can hit that in 6 months? No. But if you do the right thing, you go to the gym 6 times a week, you eat 4 meals a day, you're keeping, X, Y, and Z nutrition in your system. Look, you're going to be putting yourself in a better position today than you would be if you started this 6 months from today, right? So with that regard, it's always tough setting expectations, but the experienced clients that we have, the ones who come to me and start the call, we know it's not an overnight success. I love those people because they're not going to leave in the 6 months, right? They're going to stick it out, and it's just going to be about expectations. How do you set KPIs that are aligned with their goals? And then it's always great when you can kind of beat their expectations as well. We say, hey, it should have taken 3 months. We just did it for you in 3 weeks, right? Every market's different. Every industry is different. So it's always tough to, say what is what at the end of the day. But yeah.
That totally makes sense. And I think my last question for you is with age. I'm really curious if this has been an experience for you. I don't want to generalize that every single business owner who is elder, I would say, like, like above maybe 40 something, 50,
Sure.
like in that age range, is not is completely clueless to marketing nowadays. But I feel like that is a very common thing that I've seen with people who are older. With, like, I would say, like, the baby boomers and the Gen Xers, where they still have a very sort of old way of thinking when it comes to marketing, and like, and just like a lack of understanding of the internet, and like the digitalization of a lot of things. So they really struggle to sort of put their business out there in that way, whether it be with social media, with SEO, just in general, how much digital plays into a marketing strategy nowadays. And there's like a gap that also needs to be bridged there, because it's complicated, and like it is hard for someone who didn't grow up like that to adapt. And I've seen people who are very, they're like, they're very tech savvy. Like it doesn't matter how old they are, they understand it. They're all in for it. Do you think that there's a kind of difference there with, like a generational gap or a bridge there that you think that you've seen clients struggle with, who still, want to sort of do marketing strategies that maybe don't work anymore? Or have you found that people are just adapting to the times?
Yeah, I mean, to give a good example, I have 2 clients right now. I think one of them is closer to 70s and 80s. He's a private investigator, or he runs a private investigation company out of California. Hopping into a Google Calendar invite is a little bit tricky at times, right? So sometimes it turns into just a phone call, or, there's some of that area where it becomes a little lost in translation. But he knows he needed SEO. And, we've been working with him for over 6 months now. And I would say that was one of the areas where he wasn't per se thinking about it, right? A lot of these older, business owners, they'll Google themselves, say, wait, why don't I show up? They may not know SEO is what plays a part in that, but until someone tells them or explains it to them, that's where we kind of can make our mark. Now, I've also signed a few, maybe 50, 40 to 60-year-olds business owners who have also been told about SEO from their children, right? From someone in their 30s or 20s. We're like, hey, dad, like, or mom, you need to do this, right? You're not doing this right now. And it doesn't mean that what they're doing wasn't working, but obviously, if you want to take that next step, enter into that next level of business growth, you do need to enter into these areas. But there is a gap for sure, which is why, again, at SearchX, I truthfully started my business to also educate business owners, because there is so much jargon and technical jargon that's being thrown around here, where you can say certain things, like keyword research, right? What does that really mean to a business owner? It means, hey, looking at how you make money, we're identifying the words that make you money as a business owner, and we're going to try to find ways to get you ranking there. So it's just making sure we explain it to them in a way that makes sense. Kind of the way I use the gym analogy, the nutrition, making sure they can really understand it at the end of the day. And so that's kind of my goal. And I enjoy it because when you educate them, it's just like SEO. SEO is about educating people. It's about educating the search engines, but also the users on who you are and building up trust and authority. If I can do that for myself, right? If I sign you as a client, Daniela, and I say, hey, look, this is SEO. This is how it works. You trust me. You believe in me. Now, are you going to want to keep using me? Most likely, right? You have an SEO guy you just brought on your podcast. Maybe you don't need to go to another SEO guy, right? So that's kind of how it works. You build up that trust with the client. You explain things to them in a way that makes sense to them. But at the end of the day, you have to be a straight shooter and have to be an honest person and agency. I've unfortunately come across a lot of clients that I've signed who have come from lesser agencies in the terms of they delete pages when they sign over to us, right? They won't transition or have a good safe transfer of power from like analytics accounts or websites. Typically comes a little bit, becomes a little tricky where they're like, oh, we don't want to give you access to this. We own this, right? But really the client owns it. So there's a lot of bad agencies out there where they take advantage of that miscommunication with clients. And that's, again, something that we always try to really make a big mark of like, hey, everything we do, we're transparent about, we communicate about, and at the same time, you own everything as the client. Nothing, you fire us today, we leave with nothing except our brand name. Everything we've done for you is all yours. And we've seen it go the other way sometimes, unfortunately.
Oh, well, I think that's a great note to end on. I think, the lesson of this podcast is trust your agencies, first and foremost, right? But before we finish, if any business owner is interested in working with you, if anything that we spoke about resonated with anyone watching or listening, I want to give you the space to plug anything that you want to plug, and tell anybody where they can find you if they want to talk to you, if you're looking for people to work with. Floor is yours for whatever you want.
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, first off, thank you for having me on as well. I had a pleasure talking about SearchX. I would say if anyone is looking for SEO support, is looking to rank higher on Google, or just want to have a second set of eyes on their website to see how you are performing, you can obviously come to our website, searchxpro.com, or you can just send me a message on LinkedIn, and we can go from there. No strings attached, so happy to run a free audit. We do have one on our website, so feel free to fill that out, and we'll follow up with you from there.
Awesome. Yeah, and I will be adding the links to the description of this video so that anybody that is interested can go and find you easily. And guys, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being here, Lorenz.
Yes, thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here.
It was a pleasure having you, and I will see you on the next episode.
You've been listening to Fully Managed, brought to you by Penji. Check out the show notes to learn more about today's guest, and to learn more about Penji, the human-first creative subscription service, head over to penji.co. And by the way, if you're still listening, it would mean the absolute world to us if you were to share this podcast with a friend, and of course, subscribe.